Alright, hello, welcome. My name is Shaina, I'm an astrologer, and I'm doing a continuation in my aspect series. So basically, I'm trying to make a video for every single aspect in astrology. We're getting there slowly but surely. I haven't done one of these videos in a little bit, and I miss them. And actually, if you didn't know, I'm doing every single one of these aspect videos by request only. And since I've gotten quite a chunk of requests, I have like a whole doc of them. I decided to ask you guys what aspect you wanted to see next. So I had a few that were tied for first place, and I asked on my little community poll which one you guys would like to see. I have actually been pretty, I guess, active on the community section on my YouTube, just because it helps me know what you guys would like to see, vote on things, and I don't know. So if you want any kind of say in what videos I make, definitely check back with my community poll every now and then. So today I'm doing the aspect Sun opposite ascendant, and this was actually voted on from a community poll that I posted maybe like a week or 2 weeks ago. Here are the results. So they were pretty close, but this was the one that actually wound up winning. Before I get any further into the video, let me just get some advertising out of the way. I do sell birth chart readings on my website, shainaemily.com, if you want to check that out for full-length readings. I also have been extremely active on my TikTok recently. It's at shaina.emily. I've been posting consistently every day. Maybe it's only been like 2 weeks that I've been doing that, but that's the most consistent I've ever been on TikTok ever, so thank you. And I also have a personal Instagram. This is another aspect that I happen to have. I feel like I keep doing aspects that I have, but these are legitimately the ones that are requested. Obviously, this is coming from a lot of personal experience, and with that comes a lot of bias, more bias than most, especially because this is an aspect that the whole point of the aspect is that it's hard to see yourself for who you really are. So this aspect can be a little bit, it felt a little daunting for me to explain this aspect because I'm like, what really is this aspect? Because who really am I? You know? If you're curious, I have a Cancer rising that's opposite my Capricorn sun. And I feel like no matter what, if you have this aspect, even if it's in a loose orb, even if it's in a tight orb, it doesn't really matter. It's going to play out really strongly in your life. Just because any aspect between the sun, moon, and the rising, you know, between those three, it's just going to be such a big deal to you. If you have them talking to each other at all, that's just the literal core makeups of your personality and how they talk to each other. So you're going to be interacting with this sun opposite ascendant aspect day in and day out. So if you have it, it's prominent and you feel it for sure. This was kind of one of those aspects or things in my chart that made me really first believe and want to study astrology, was because I felt like there was no other way to explain this feeling of sun opposite ascendant except through the astrological term sun opposite ascendant. So what does that mean, right? So the first kind of thing that I want to get into is major identity issues. This is somebody with a split personality. Also, I'm wearing this shirt because it's like opposite, see, sun opposite rising. Like this would be my Cancer rising, this would be my Capricorn sun, right? Depending on what you are. One half of you is the angel, one half of you is the devil. See, I'm still dressing to the video. Now, if you haven't seen, I have a whole aspect video already up explaining each of the aspects, you know, what an opposition is, how it's calculated, all that stuff. So if you're not sure what that is, I'll put that up here in the cards. And actually, coming up in the next few weeks, I'm going to have a video all about the planets in astrology. I will also link that up in the cards right now. Basically, sun opposite ascendant can be summarized with identity issues. Okay, am I this or am I this? Sometimes I act like this, but other times I act like this. People see me as this, but I'm really this. But actually, am I what people see me as, or am I wanting to be this and trying to put it on? Right? It can be very confusing, very back and forth, which is very true with the opposition in general. This creates a very hypocritical personality. No matter what with an opposition, it means that these two things are hypocritical, but when it's between two core aspects of your personality, which are your first impression and your general ego, essence, vibe, I will honestly just say the sun is your personality. That's kind of what it is. So when these two things, which is your first impression and your personality, are different and hypocritical, this creates a hypocritical person, a hypocritical personality in nature. I've also noticed that usually people with some sort of strong opposition between their sun, moon, and rising, one of those, are drawn to other people with a strong opposition between their sun, moon, and rising. Might not be the same one, but a huge thing with sun opposite ascendant is feeling like you're typecast, if you know what that is. Basically, your first impression is just totally off. It's just totally incorrect. And people seem to never get you. People seem to never kind of peg you correctly. Whatever people first think of when they see you, when they meet you, it just doesn't align with who you are and even how you see yourself much at all. And it can be very frustrating to get these two things to align together. Now, I'm somebody that favors my sun because my sun is in a conjunction with my moon. So obviously that side of my chart is getting a lot more weight. But if you favor your rising, like you have a lot of planets in the first house, you have a lot of similar energies, or your rising is well aspected other than the fact that it's opposite your sun, you might feel that you really like your first impression and the vibe that you give off, but it's almost like you can't live up to it. You almost feel like you don't want people to get too close to you because then they might find out the real you. And usually you think that people respond poorly to the real you. You want people to keep seeing you at the surface level. Now I feel the exact opposite of that. I'm like, can we please just get and cut straight to the chase, get past this small talk, and can we figure out who I really am so that you can understand me and know who I am, not have some weird misconstrued idea of who I am. But it just depends on your personal chart and how that plays out. But no matter what, it's just like your first impression's off. There's something off about it, right? And you can't seem to line it up with who you really are, no matter how hard you try. You know, you might get people saying things like, oh, I thought you were like this at first, but really you're like this. Now, in real life, people don't say it that nice. They're more say it like, no, you are like your rising. You're lying to me when you act like your sun. And you're like, what are you talking about? You're putting this rising on me. When I act like my sun, that's who I really am. What do you mean, you know? Or somebody might be like, I expect you to act like your rising, so you are like your rising. And you're like, okay, I guess this is a mask that I have to put on. You know, everybody calls the ascendant your mask, and I think that that's not always true for everyone. If somebody has like a really, I honestly want to say like authentic, true to who they are, well aspected rising, that's not a mask. Like, yeah, we all kind of put on costumes sometimes, but that's just going along with who they are, and they're showing it off. They're telling you who they are. But with this sun opposite ascendant, your ascendant is definitely a mask that you wear, whether purposefully, whether accidentally, whether as a coping mechanism, whether because you feel obligated to, whether because you know no other way, you know, whatever it is, it feels like a mask. Now, the rising is obviously a little bit more, I guess I'll call it shallow. So it has a lot to do with how you look. And with your rising opposite your ascendant, you really probably do not look how you act. And that kind of plays into that incorrect typecast. Oh, I thought you were a sweet little girl, but you're actually really mature and can handle yourself. Or, oh, I thought you were a big loner and I thought you were rude and you had an RBF, but you're actually like super friendly and like so open to people, and I didn't expect that. You know, whatever it might be. Another big thing with the rising opposite the sun is that there's a high chance that you are underestimated in the things that you are good at and overestimated in the things that you are bad at. So maybe like a really easy example would to be at work. If somebody had their rising opposite their sun, let's put them in a retail situation just because that's easy. Let's say that the person would be really, really good at the cash register because of X, Y, and Z, but they keep on being put in the back to do backstock, and they're like, ugh, if only they knew how good I am with people and how much I can upsell them, but instead I'm being stuck in backstock. It can be really hard to feel like you're ever put in the places that allow you to shine because the sun is shining, the sun is bright, and with the rising kind of blocking that and obscuring that, you feel like you're always put in places that you're not allowed to shine your light in. And another big thing is because no matter what, with the sun opposite ascendant, your sun is going to be on the complete opposite side of your chart than your rising is. And that's basically the area of life which is shadow work, right? So especially this is emphasized if you have the sun in the 7th house. There can be, and I'll talk about this later, you can have a sun opposite ascendant with your sun in your 6th house. Pretty much basically with sun opposite ascendant, your sun is on the descendant or near the descendant, no matter what though. And basically what comes with that is that you live in the realm of shadow work, basically, because the 7th house is your shadow. The opposite side of your rising is your shadow, because what's rising casts the shadow on the other side of the chart, right? And so basically your ego, your personality, you live in your shadow. And for so long I've heard that and I've always been like, what does that mean? And I'm like, do I not understand what that means because I'm just always living it? Like, I don't know. And the best way that I could think about it was that, and I don't know if this is the most relatable thing, but I'm really trying to understand what people mean by like, I need to do more shadow work. Because I feel like all spiritual stuff is shadow work. Like you're trying to see your faults. You're trying to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are. And a lot of spirituality you come to when you're in your darkest of times, which means that you're kind of always working in shadow work. But also, I know that a lot of people's view of spirituality mostly has to do with like, I want positive tarot readings and I'm going to take out the death card and take out reversals so I get only positive messages. And maybe that's how it is with people with their sun closer to the ascendant. I don't know. Basically, how I answered this question was like, okay, if I was given some like magical wand or new contacts, I don't know, where I could like see myself clearly, the first thing I would do is I wouldn't be like, oh, what's so great about me? What are my talents? You know, what are my strengths? Because I feel like I get that. Like, I'm like, I understand those things. I don't need that. Instead, I'd be like, was I wrong in this situation? What's wrong with me? Is this a weakness, or am I just thinking it's a weakness because that's being projected? Are these things that people telling me, are they wrong or right? Like, are people right about me or are they wrong about me? Am I just projecting? Are they just projecting? Like, should I keep doing me, or am I stepping on everyone and causing problems? Which, like, that's shadow work, right? Like, I'm asking the questions that would be asked of shadow work. That must be what they mean by you're always living in your shadow. You're always trying to kind of figure out what's wrong with you instead of what's right with you. I was like, maybe. You guys can let me know if you feel like that resonates. Speaking of all those sorts of questions, with the sun conjunct the descendant and opposite the ascendant, there's going to be a fixation on who that person is and who you are. And if you're seeing them right and if they're seeing you right. Even if you don't have your sun in your 7th house, this is going to come into play no matter what if your sun is opposite your ascendant, which means it's conjunct the descendant, okay? So some questions that you can get really fixated on and that I think people with this aspect ask themselves all the time is, who really is that person? Who really am I? Why do we do the things that we do? Why do I do the things that I do? Why do they do the things that they do? Why do we as a collective act like this? Why do we as a collective not act like this? Who am I? But who am I really? Who are they? But who are they really? Are they acting like this? Or is it actually me acting like this? Are they the problem or am I the problem? Are we both the problem? Why can't I seem to see the situation clearly? Does that person see the situation clearly? Maybe they see the situation clearer than me. Why does it feel like I look at everything and everyone through a glass wall? And sometimes it can even feel like I don't know. Maybe this is just only me, but I think this is a relatable thing where if I really wish like an outside source or an outside camera or like a third party person would be able to explain me or the situation clearly, like no bias. If I could have anything, that's what I want so much at the time. Like I'm always like, I need an unbiased third party source because everyone, including me, is so biased. Wishing things like, I wish I could have an objective opinion about this. Why does my ego and their ego have to cloud everything? I wish I knew who I really was. I wish I could act aligned with my true self when someone first meets me. Why do people always expect me to be like blank? Am I like blank? Should I act like blank? Or should I try to be like blank? Should I try to be what people want and expect of me? Or should I just be me? Or is being what people want and expect of me being me? What even is me? How do you just be? Those are all, I think, questions that somebody with sun opposite the ascendant dwells on a lot. And not that people without sun opposite ascendant never ask these questions, because obviously everybody that has a sun and an ego does. But I think with sun conjunct the descendant, it's even more of a hyperfixation. Like if you had sun conjunct the rising, there would be much more of just an ability to just be and do and act. But with sun conjunct the descendant, or, opposite the ascendant, there's constant reflecting, constant looking back over things, constant wondering if you're projecting or not, or if they're projecting onto you. Everything feels like it all just goes into itself, and it can be really kind of overwhelming sometimes. So now, where did this all come from? Where did this start from? What is kind of at the core of these problems or these things that we deal with or have? It's our dad, duh. No. Really though, with this, it probably is, because the sun does represent the father in astrology. And with sun opposite ascendant, specifically, there's going to be, I called it like, it feels like there are fathers' split expectations. On one end, sometimes, certain times they require you to be this, but in other times, in other aspects, they require you to be the exact opposite. So how can you want me to be this, but yet also want me to be this, when those two things are completely contrarian? How do I manage to be both of these things for my father? Or how do I manage these expectations that are placed upon me to do both simultaneously when one cancels out the other? It makes no sense. Also, there probably is as well a split personality that you see within your father. Now, this is really easy for me. I'll just use an honest example because my dad does not have this aspect, but he does have a Virgo rising Pisces sun, and he does have this aspect with among his rising and his Mercury, so there is still a split there. But my father also has a Grand Cross, and my dad definitely has a split personality, for sure, for sure, for sure. And that split within him played out really prominently within me. Now, it's different for me. It's in Cancer, Capricorn, but there still is that earth water energy. And I definitely remember growing up all the time trying to explain to my friends that I just felt like nobody saw the real him. Nobody knew what it was actually like to have him as a father. They saw the side of him that he would show to them very strategically, in my opinion, but he never showed the side of him that was very demanding, very hard to have as father, very aggressive even. Like my friends would have never in a billion years believed me if I would have said that or tried to explain that. I've only had one person in my entire life see what he was actually like, and it's a big reason why I don't talk to him anymore, because somebody saw it and was like, why are you around that? And I was like, that's what I thought. Okay. I think also with sun opposite ascendant, there is a little bit of a wall in between you and your father, because you have to put on a certain face to greet him, to see him. He only wants to see one side of you, and you have to keep the other side hidden a lot of times. And so because of that, you probably felt like you could never actually really get close to him. You felt like you could never be fully honest or vulnerable, or you could only be vulnerable with him, and you couldn't ever put on your true face of, I don't really give a fuck what's going on, I just have to pretend I always care. You know, whatever it was, there was just some side of you that you always had to hide away, always had to tuck away. It just really feels like your father doesn't see you, and also it feels like he doesn't want to see you for who you really are. If you don't have a father, or if your father isn't prominent in your life, this could also just play out in the fact that you never knew him, and so of course he never gets to see who you really are. And because you never knew him, you don't know who he really is either. So you're just kind of hearing what people tell you about him, hearing what people say, and what they say may be very opposite to who he really was. And so you may be always trying to put on this face of what people told you he was, when in reality you're like him because you're the opposite. But you know what I'm trying to say. That's not what people are telling you though. So it's just a lot of misinformation. Also, you might feel like your father doesn't see himself for who he truly is. This might even be something that was passed down throughout your family, or passed down onto you in many different ways. Or even this could be somebody with like a split ethnicity. I don't have a split ethnicity, but there was like a definitely strong divide of religion in my house. My dad's side of the family was extraordinarily Jewish. They were very Jewy. My mom's side of the family was not religious at all. And it was like a very big deal to my dad's side of the family that he was marrying a non-Jew and she had to convert, and all that stuff was definitely a big point of contention in my household. And I think that also shows that sun opposite ascendant as well. You might be, you know, from a split ethnicity and you don't look like your father's ethnicity, but you feel like you act a lot like it, and people don't peg you as that ethnicity even though you feel a lot closer to it. And that could also be a major thing that plays out here. Just the fact that your dad had identity issues in himself was definitely passed down onto you, and he might have only wanted to see in you certain good traits of him. He might project onto you and say, well, I'm like this, so you should be too, even though that's not always how things play out. Or I'm not like that, so how are you like that? Or if he doesn't like a part of him that he hides, he might get really mad when you show that part of him because he doesn't acknowledge it in him. Like, if this sounds like there's a lot of projecting, there's so much projecting in this aspect. And obviously that goes much farther than just the father. Then this travels to everyone and anyone after that, but that's kind of where it has its roots. Now, as I mentioned, there's usually one side, either the rising or the sun, that you feel obligated to, and then the other one that you favor. Now this isn't always true because, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I think generally it's more true than it's not. So first off, if you have a stronger sun and a weaker rising, you will favor yourself while still being confused to what that is and what that means. You'll feel obligated to your rising and feel like you have to put on a certain face for everyone, as your real face is not accepted, which again, as I mentioned, this is like masking. I'm autistic. This definitely plays a huge role in my autism and plays a huge role in my ability to mask and how much I masked growing up. And also the fact that I wasn't diagnosed until I was 23. 2023, my sun was opposite ascendant. People still don't believe me. People still don't see me as this autistic person. Even I think like when I tell people I'm a Capricorn, they don't really see that. When I tell people even like my Myers-Briggs is like INTJ, I don't feel like people expect that or see that in me either. Most people would expect an E and an F, but I'm so far from both of those. Now, with this favoring your sun but not liking your rising, you might really like yourself, but you feel like things rarely ever seem to go your way when you favor your sun. It can feel like you only get positive results when you favor your rising. And because of that, everyone requires you to act like it, and so you feel like you're not really allowed to act like your sun. I definitely feel like I relate to my rising, and while you probably feel like you relate to your rising, and you probably feel like you embody your rising and it's true and all that sort of stuff, you do feel like it hinders you and it stops you, and it can be a real frustration and a point of contention. Yet it's also in the same vein something that you hide behind to be accepted, and also not like, I don't know, thrown in jail or something. I feel like a lot of us, if we were to act too much like we're our sun when we favor our rising, like real bad consequences could come into play. Not because we're terrible people, but just because our real personality is too obtrusive, or we just feel like it's not allowed to be shown. It's maybe not illegal to show it, but it feels illegal, And also even farther than that, you feel like people never really get to know the real you, or people never really feel to care to get to know the real you. Now, let's go into if you have a stronger rising, if you favor your rising sign. This one was harder for me to wrap my head around because I've always been like, so I had to remind myself that there are people that favor their rising. I don't know. You really favor the way that people see you and approach you, but you really don't want them to get too close because that's when things go awry. This is somebody that is the opposite. They like small talk. They only want to talk about the little things or the safe things, because if they talk about anything unsafe, they know that it will really polarize them and people will be turned off by them and people won't want to get to know them. Now, that's true with me as well, but I don't care. Also, you really enjoy people's first impression of you. You might even really like your typecast, but you can never feel like you can live up to it. You never feel like you can perform in that way, and it can frustrate you that you don't like that your strength is not what people think your strength is. Also, you probably really like how you appear, like how you come across, and you feel like you actually really like what people first see you as, but for some reason, you can't get your ego and your personality to line up with that. Your ego will just not express itself in an aligned way. If you favor neither, honestly, because they're both poorly aspected, with that, you just basically don't feel aligned with yourself and people's view or expectations of you. You don't feel aligned with either. I was thinking like you probably feel like you're a doll trapped in a body with a soul that other people dictate and tell you who you are, tell you why you're here, tell you what you're doing here, and tell you how well you're doing it, and you get no say in the matter. I definitely think that personality disorders or issues where you feel very disassociated from yourself, and maybe you even isolate yourself because of it, could be very prevalent with an unhealthy sun and rising that are in opposition to each other. Just because you feel like nobody will ever know you, including yourself, this can cause a lot of depression. This can cause a lot of problems, personality issues, all that sort of stuff. Projection. Projection is so huge with this aspect, and it's so confusing to me because I'm constantly asking myself if I'm just projecting. I'm constantly asking myself if they're just projecting, and it just, like I said, it all feeds into yourself. It really feels like when you have trip brain and everything is just going into itself and you're in a perpetual little circle that never ends. So let's talk about 7th house. If you have your sun in the 7th house and it's conjunct the descendant, how that plays out. Normally I can't get this specific with aspects, but this is like one of the few aspects that is like, your rising is here, your sun's gonna be here. So I can get a lot more specific with this aspect, so I kind of wanted to. Again, with the 7th house, it's just projection times a billion. You definitely identify strongly with the friends and the people that are around you, and they identify very strongly with you actually, but it's rare that they ever own up to it. You know what I've been saying about 7th house suns, and I think it's something really important. If you have this aspect in a 7th house sun, this is something you should probably really keep in the back of your mind and listen and take in and own. Like, let's say I have like a flank and a hammer, okay? When we think about hitting that hammer, we think of the hammer striking that flank, and that's what makes the noise. But we rarely ever think about how without the flank being there, that hammer wouldn't ever make that noise. So they both needed to be there to respond and to react and create that noise. Even though we think the hammer's making that noise, That's actually technically how the hammer's hitting the wood and the wood that's being there and what the wood sounds like that's creating that noise. So what I feel is like that flank of wood or whatever it might be is the 7th house person, while the hammer is everyone else around them. So everyone else around them says, oh, I came into your life and that's why you're acting like this. I came into your life and that's how you got this, your personality, or you got this or you got that, and you're basing it all off of me. When in reality, they're still hitting that wood flank. They're still reflecting this off of you. You're actually the one that's making the sound. You're actually the one that's showing them who they are, and you're actually the one that is adding a lot to the situation. So a lot of times with the 7th house sun opposite the ascendant conjunct the descendant, we can walk away from relationships feeling like we were so heavily affected by them and we were so changed by them, but they weren't at all affected or changed by us, when that couldn't be farther from the truth. And the person that walked away from the 7th house sun probably didn't acknowledge the fact that the 7th house sun had changed them during the course of that relationship. It probably isn't until they walk away and they really think about it, if they do reflect, they realize how much they have also been changed by that relationship. There can be a big problem with this aspect, with putting down the qualities you see in yourself that you don't like and searching for the opposite in friends who you feel like can bring out the real you. Or even maybe even really liking certain qualities that you see in yourself and searching so strongly for those qualities in somebody else so that they can bring them out in you. Whatever it is, there's, obviously a big theme of opposites. You're looking for people based off of the personality traits that they reflect onto you. And you definitely can really heavily associate yourself with your friends. And you also really heavily associate how other people think of your friends or the people around you in general. You associate that with how they think of you as well. It can be really hard to separate yourself from people, especially the people that are close to you. It's really easy for your friends and your family and just people around you to project their bad qualities onto you. And it's really hard for you to know if they're telling the truth or not. It's really hard for you to separate what's real and what's not, and what's them and what's you. I don't have the answer for if that's true or not. If you have those qualities or not, I don't know. Because I don't know if I do, There can even be projecting in the sense that there can be a thing of, oh, I see in this person, they're so, insert trait here. Oh man, I admire them so much because they're insert trait here. And you don't see at all how you also have that trait. You have that trait and that's yours, and you use that. People are envious of that in you. That person might even be envious that you have that in you, but you can really push that aside and project that onto them. So whatever it is, whatever trait that you admire in the other people around you so much, or the trait that you look for, you probably possess just as much, if not more, if not even more naturally, because you're unaware of it than them. I definitely just feel like people online, like you wouldn't respond well to me if you knew the real me. And that could just be in general in real life too. Like, oh, if you, you only think you like me, you don't actually know who I am. There's definitely a lot of that. Or you're just projecting onto me, and one day, once the projection fades, you'll realize you've been fooled and you hate me, or, I'll be at fault. And it can be very frustrating because I'm definitely somebody who was like, I'm not trying. All I want to do is put on an authentic version of myself and be an authentic version of myself. And it's hard because being opposite to who you are is being an authentic version of yourself upon first impression, because that's authentically what's in your chart, but that is innately inauthentic. But if you were to be who you are, if you were to be your sun off the bat, that would feel strange and weird and cringy, and it wouldn't be true to yourself either. Oh, trip brain. With 6th house, with this opposition, I think there's definitely an emphasis on a projection of intellect, projections of cleanliness, projections of taking care of yourself, whether you can take care of yourself or not, whether you are smart or not, whether you're clean or messy, put together, got your shit together or not, whatever it might be. Those projections are weird and back and forth. And a lot of times it can feel like you're either keeping it together on the outside or spiraling on the inside, or spiraling on the outside, yet actually you're keeping it together on the inside. Again, this is definitely emphasized, this underestimated versus overestimated thing. Also striving versus relaxing. Am I going to rest on my laurels, or am I going to actually do the damn thing? No matter what, your sun is conjunct your descendant, relationships and the other plays a huge role. And your life can probably be marked in phases by who is around you and who's the closest person around you during that time. There's probably only one person that's close to you at a time, or a few people, but probably one or two. And who was the closest with you during that time, that will feel like one phase of your life when this was my best friend, one phase of my life when this was my best friend, one phase of life when I was in a relationship with this person, or whatever it was. Also, I should have mentioned that this is also the house of open enemies. The 12th house is the house of hidden enemies, but the 7th house is the house of open enemies. So you're going to find a lot of enemies throughout life, no matter what, when you have this conjunct the descendant, especially if it's in the 7th house. And people are going to be really upfront to you and really try to expose you a lot, for sure. To kind of round out this video, I'm probably never gonna do this again unless it's another like opposition with the midheaven or the rising, just because it would be so impossible to do it with all the combinations. But because this aspect is so personalized to what sign your rising is in and what sign your sun is in, I just want to take a second just to make this video longer, what I love to do, to talk about basically each of the rising and sun sign combinations. Now, there is a big possibility for you to have an out of sign opposition. Like, for example, you can be an Aries rising with a Virgo sun and still have this opposition. In which case, you know what? If you comment what your rising sun combination is, that's not the traditional sister signs opposites. If you comment it down below, I will make the strong effort to respond and give you what yours would kind of play out as if you're interested. But just to kind of keep the video length down and to keep my brain not from exploding, I'm going to go over just basically the sister sign opposites and what it's like to have one in the rising and one in the sun, just because I'm so fascinated by this aspect. I'm so fascinated by how these energies play out. So I want to talk about it. And if you have one of these, I would love it if down below you kind of shared your experience, you kind of shared if this relates to you. Again, I only have one of these, so I could be wrong, but you can let me know. So first up we have Aries rising, Libra sun. So this is me versus them, or me versus you. Basically, you feel in order to survive, you must always fend for yourself. When in reality, you would honestly love to be able to find a partner, open up, and share your life with them. People also always assume you are much more selfish and self-assertive and ego-driven than you are, when in reality, you're actually a lot more aware of the other person and how they're feeling and how they're doing. You just feel like you were never kind of allowed to be growing up because you're put in this position where it was survival of the fittest, fend for yourself. There's also definitely a very masculine presentation and feminine feeling though. Now these are both masculine signs, but I think of Aries as the fraternity and Libra as the sorority. So there's a much more other oriented person in you than what comes across. Libra rising, Aries sun. So this is them versus me, or you versus me. With this combination, you feel an obligation to be aware of what everyone else thinks of you and what everyone else wants you to be, when you just wish you could throw that away and just be you. People really underestimate your ability to shine on your own. You always have to be this mediator for everyone else and kind of put your opinions and your own wants down for the sake of the people or the person around you. People do not allow you to decide on your life and share your opinions. People try to decide for you, and that can be very, very frustrating. There's also might be this feeling that you come across a lot more feminine, but you're really a lot more masculine, or you get typecast as more of a girly girl, but you're really able to do much more masculine, stronger, fit things. Taurus rising, Scorpio sun. This is safety versus vulnerability. Everyone severely underestimates you, what you've been through, where you've come from, all that you've done in your life. You really feel obligated to put on this sort of safe, warm face when people first meet you, when in reality, on the inside, you're really hurting and all you want to do is run free. I think a perfect example of this is Miley Cyrus. She's a Taurus rising. Now she's a Sagittarius sun, Scorpio moon, so it's not exact, but if you just think about her Taurus rising and, you know, needing to be like Hannah Montana Disney star, but in reality, she had a much more mature life than she was allowed to have. And definitely, you know, the whole bangers era. You might always feel like you're trying to get to your bangers era, you know? Oh yeah, her sun's opposite the ascendant, and so is her moon, and so is her Mercury, and so is her Pluto. So even though her sun isn't necessarily in Scorpio, this plays out very similarly to her. So she's a great example. Now, Scorpio rising, Taurus sun. This is vulnerability versus safety. People tend to be very intimidated by you. Everyone says you have a resting bitch face. Everyone is really polarized to you on the first glance, and they might even be scared to get close to you. But in reality, you're quite a warm-hearted, very open person, and people never give you the chance. All you really want is to find a real simple, true love and to find your safe space in life. But it feels like you're never allowed to do that. It seems like no space and no place or no person ever winds up being safe for you. People think you're this really hardened person, but in reality, you still have a very soft, warm heart. And you just want to be loved and taken care of. You want to stop having to fight so hard for everything and yourself. You're probably exhausted. All right, Gemini rising, Sagittarius sun. I'm gonna call myself out a little bit. This combination is always the hardest for me. For some reason, I love both Gemini and Sagittarius so much, and I see them as both so funny, and it might just be because my boyfriend has this opposition, and I just think I don't see it fully, but I see these two signs as honestly the most agreeable, even though I know they're not. So I apologize if this one isn't perfect. Please let me know your feelings on it down below. But this is my thoughts versus your thoughts. So everyone, I think, underestimates your intellect, underestimates your integrity, and underestimates your maturity. Your mind goes 1,000 miles a minute, and you feel obligated to put on a billion different faces when in reality, all you want to do is follow your one true path. But it seems like you always are obligated to get distracted. You're always obligated to discover a billion more things. There also might be some infantilization that occurred because Gemini is the child, and you probably always wanted to grow up and out of that, but you might have never been able to. This could even be somebody that was forced to grow up with a lot of siblings and really had no want to. All right, Sagittarius rising, Gemini sun. So this is your thoughts versus my thoughts, or your opinion versus my opinion. So you have always had unreasonably high expectations on your shoulders, you know, to be perfect, to go down a certain path, to be wise, intelligent, mature, but you've always just been much more open-minded, much more nonchalant, much more curious about your life, but you feel like maybe you weren't ever able to explore it in the way that you wanted. Maybe even this could be a major like displacement thing where you were born in a different country than you feel comfortable in, or you're forced to move when you just want to stay around the neighborhood, something along those lines. Or maybe you're an only child when you wish that you had a bunch of siblings. This one's kind of the hardest, I think, for me to understand, but I think this is definitely one that deals with a lot of overestimation. Everybody's overestimating you. Everybody expects you to be great at the maths and sciences when that's just kind of overwhelming and you're more curious about X, Y, and Z. You know, you want to be involved and have your finger in a bunch of pots and learn a little bit about a lot, but you've been always forced to go down this one singular path. Like I could see this as somebody that was like forced to be a doctor and follow in their dad's footsteps when they really had no want to, and they were much more curious, but they didn't get to explore that. All right, Cancer rising, Capricorn sun. This is mine, so I relate. I know. This is your heart versus your head. Everyone severely underestimates your talent, abilities, but especially your competency. Everyone assumes you're much more emotional and dependent than you really are. You have a much more thicker skin than it seems. This is definitely somebody who is being seen as younger, being seen as much more taken care of, and much more dependent than they actually are. You probably weren't allowed to grow up, even though in certain situations you were obligated to grow up as well. This is definitely a combination that gets severely underestimated. You know, do I go with my emotions or do I go with what I know is right? Do I go with other people's feelings or do I go with what I know is true? All right, Capricorn rising, Cancer sun. This is head versus heart. You always had to take care of yourself and you had to grow up really quickly. However, you just kind of wanted to stay home and get to be a kid. You never got to be taken care of. You never got to be nurtured in the way that you wanted to, and you yearned for that. You had to instead just kind of grow up really fast, mature really quickly, and you were never allowed to be expressive and explore. You had to really, you know, from a very young age. People overestimate you and you feel like you can never live up to those expectations, and that can be really that can be a real confidence jab a lot of times. People are always expecting for you to be independent, but all you want to do sometimes is be wrapped up, held, and loved. You wish people would open up to you, but they rarely ever do. Leo rising, Aquarius sun. This is my wants versus our needs. This is kind of funny, but I definitely think with this combination, you come across more basic than you are. Like you come across and people kind of underestimate you in the sense of like how cultured you are, maybe how much you know, your knowledge, how different of a person you are. You feel a big obligation to maybe fit in with the crowd a little bit more than you naturally do. Your true weird self was never fully accepted. Your intellect and passion for things is far greater, and it was never really nurtured. People always just wanted to kind of have you be put on a stage and perform, but you didn't really want to do that. You wanted to work more behind the scenes. Also, people think you're much more selfish and much more one-dimensional than you really are. Aquarius rising, Leo sun. This is our needs versus my wants. You feel like you have always been forced to put the needs of everybody else above your own. You wish you could shine and be a star and have all eyes on you, but you always feel like that was looked down upon and never allowed growing up. Also, people will tell you that you come across with like a chip on your shoulder, like you think you're better than everybody, when in reality, you feel like you're just being you and you're not trying to come across that way. You don't feel better than anybody. In fact, you're probably very self-unaware, even though everybody thinks you're very self-aware. All right, then we have Virgo rising, Pisces sun. So this is practicality versus passions, or even practicality versus dreams. So rules and order need to be in place, but yet you struggle to follow them. Life and expectations wanted you to follow a very traditional route, but you couldn't do that. You were always led by your dreams and by your heart and by your passions. You feel an obligation to come across perfect and come across polished, even though that is honestly far from who you really are. You wish people would just accept you to be what you are and be who you are and just let you be, but that never seems to be the case. People are always placing restrictions and limitations upon you. Pisces rising, Virgo sun. This is passions versus practicality. People really underestimate your knowledge and your ability to get a job done. You wish you were given the responsibility, but it never seems to fall onto you. Everyone seemed to want to keep you ignorant, young, and stupid, and you have worked so hard to try to push out of that, yet that's where people always place you. Also, there was a big obligation to be the shoulder for everyone to cry on, even though you feel as though you struggle with that. And you also feel like you never had anybody else's shoulder to cry on. You were always asked to follow your dreams or some elusive thing, but you don't understand what that elusive thing is that you're chasing. You'd much rather chase something that's much more practical and concrete, but it feels like that's never given to you. Also, people have a very skewed opinion of you. They don't understand you, and they say that there's a lot of gray in your personality, yet you feel like you are very obviously black or white, you know, metaphorically. All right, again, if I didn't mention your combination, just leave it down below in the comments and I'll do my best to give you a short synopsis of what that would play out like. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it resonated, and please leave your aspect requests down below if there's any aspect you would like for me to touch on. Again, I do these all by request, so definitely comment it down below and check over at my community page every now and then to see if I'm holding a new poll. I am going to try to keep doing these once a month, so there'll always be kind of a new poll coming up and you can vote on which one you would like me to do. But it was cool of you guys to request an aspect that I have. Maybe that's why I was requested, because I don't know, maybe you know I have it and so you have it and you think I'm the best person to talk about it. I don't know. Do you think that way? Am I projecting? Am I showing my insecurity? Am I showing my opposite ascendant? I'm just kidding. All right, again, I sell birth chart readings on my website, shainaemily.com. I have a TikTok that I've been much more active on, at shaina.emily. Some asshole took Shaina Emily, pissed. And I also have an Instagram. All right, thank you so much for watching. Bye.